All right, Colts fans, we are back here with Stoney Keeley. You might remember him from a couple weeks ago. He covers the Titans. He's the head honcho of Sobros Network. Stoney, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing pretty well, feeling pretty good after that win in Baltimore, smacking the Ravens around twice in the same calendar year. It wasn't the beating they laid on him in the playoffs in January, but I will take a Derrick Henry gut check run in overtime just the same.
Right, yeah. So these Colts and Titans, they played each other 2 weeks ago. You can say it was a close game. The Titans had them in the first half. The Colts dominated the second half, so kind of evened each other out. Colts lost close to the Ravens. You guys just beat the Ravens, and then we both won in overtime. So things are traveling kind of even keeled for those two teams.
Holding serve.
Absolutely. So obviously we're pretty familiar with the teams by now. Again, they just played each other 2 weeks ago. Not a lot's changed. Both teams won their matchup last week in overtime. So this Sunday's game, once again, is for the AFC South lead. I can't imagine that a whole lot has changed for you guys. But did you notice anything different in the Titans game against the Ravens last week that maybe they cleaned up as a result from losing to the Colts the week before?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think we saw the Titans defense kind of respond in anger, so to speak. They were
Mhm.
really up for this Ravens game. And it's one of sort of the unheralded rivalries. I don't think a lot of people around the NFL realize it, but amongst the two fan bases, Titans Ravens is a big, hateful kind of game.
Mhm.
So you saw the defense really play a more physical style than we'd seen it before. Specifically, I would give a game ball to Rashaan Evans, who had drawn a bit of criticism from Titans fans throughout the course of the season for being quote unquote invisible. But he really showed up in that game in run support, and it felt like every other play they were calling his name. And when you get a physical tone setting performance like that, and then your defense responds around you, and they're able to really kind of frustrate the reigning MVP. The defense was working at its best, I would say, outside of maybe the Buffalo game earlier in the season. I think this was an aggressive, angry, really inspired performance by the Titans defense, and we haven't seen that a lot this season.
Yeah, that's a good point you make. That's kind of a secret rivalry. I go back to seeing the Super Bowl run the Ravens went on, I think in 2000. I just picture Ray Lewis versus Eddie George,
Oh
and then
man.
you've
Oh
got
yeah.
little seeds throughout there like the Steve McNair stuff. Like
Yeah. Well, and
that's
then in 2008, they made in the divisional round. The Titans were 13-3 that year, the top seed in the AFC. That was probably the best chance the Titans had of making a Super Bowl since the days of Steve and Eddie. And the Ravens go out there and injure Chris Johnson. I'm a bitter Titans fan. I'm going to say it was on purpose, but you take down Chris Johnson, and then Algie Crumpler drops a pass, and the Ravens upset the best Titans team that we've probably seen in a decade. There's some bad blood between these two teams.
well, I mean, thank you guys for beating them and maybe sending them
Happy to.
down a peg since they had a tiebreaker against us. Um, so the offensive line for the Titans still a little shaky. There's some new injuries. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, they're down Taylor Lewan to begin with, the All Pro left tackle. It's a huge loss, and we've seen it affect this offense on the field. Ty Sambraio, I thought, was doing a serviceable job filling in for him, but now he's hurt, which means they're down to their third left tackle, David Quessenberry, a guy who's a really good athlete, and I thought he played well in relief of Sambraio against the Ravens. Aaron Brewer in at left guard for Roger Saffold. So your whole left side of your offensive line is down now. And they both played well against the Ravens, but when you're talking about depth players getting chances like this, you just wonder how long they're going to be able to sustain it. So I think moving forward, there is going to be some creativity on the part of Art Smith to try and figure out new ways to kind of retool this offense to play maybe masking that side of the line, maybe more tight ends to the left, maybe more receivers in line blocking. I know they used Cameron Batson in a few packages early on against the Ravens, so you might see a little extra help on that side of the line moving forward. But the right side of the line still playing pretty steady at this point.
Yeah, the Colts have their own kind of oddity on the right side right now. Braden Smith popped up with a thumb injury in practice. He missed the game. LaRaven Clark started out at right tackle, but then they switched to Chaz Green in the second half. They said that was kind of by plan, which is a little odd, but we'll see what goes on this week. Hopefully, Braden Smith is back. Speaking of offensive line play and what that facilitates, it's obviously the strength of the team. But when the Colts and Titans played 2 weeks ago, did you feel at all like the Titans were kind of sticking with the run to a fault in the second half?
I don't think so, because I think there was an attempt to kind of fix the offense. And in order to do that, you do have to get back to your bread and butter a little bit. And then it didn't really help that your best playmaker is dropping a couple balls. Anthony Ferkser, usually a reliable chain mover for this offense, dropped a couple balls. And when you're not getting that sort of contribution from your playmakers, I think it does sort of limit what you can do offensively. And in their mind, they're probably saying, hey, Derrick Henry's our best guy left. We just need to ride him out, and that's going to give us our best chance to succeed, because we've seen it several times before, particularly in close games. When you get later in the game, they just ride Henry out, punch it in, and go up a touchdown and just ride that out. So I think it was sort of – I don't think it was to a fault. I think there have been some criticisms of Art Smith and company in town saying, hey, we do need to get some of our playmakers more involved. But I think it was just a night when things weren't working for the passing game. So you had to do what gave you the best chance to win.
Yeah, that last part, I was about to echo that. That the run game, it was working with Derrick Henry. He had over 100 yards. The passing game just wasn't. You mentioned there were some drops. AJ Brown had just one catch. Corey Davis did all right, but in general, the passing game just wasn't clicking. So they were kind of trying to get back to their baseline. But I just think the clock probably just ran out on them on that obviously. So what is the biggest thing that you think the Titans would need to correct this week in order to actually close it out and beat the Colts that they didn't do a couple weeks ago?
I think two things on offense, like we were just talking about. I think you have to get your playmakers fed, get them involved early, and just keep feeding them the ball. We saw what that meant for the offense when Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, Corey Davis were all on Sunday. It made this offense look completely different than it did the week before against the Indianapolis Colts. So I think you got to get those playmakers involved, and they've got to step up and make plays. And then on defense, you've got to have some sort of answer for the quick, shifty running backs. We saw at the first meeting, Hines absolutely torched the Titans. And then even though they won the game on Sunday, J.K. Dobbins was able to have some success against this defense that's still allowing a lot of space. And they've got to get that corrected, or else I think it's going to be more of the same.
Yeah, when you and I talked a couple weeks ago, you had hoped the run game would not get started up in that matchup.
Yeah.
And although, I mean, it wasn't one guy dominating it, and there was a lot of Nyheim Hines in the receiving game, but Jonathan Taylor did just have that nice game last week against the Packers. He had 22 carries for 90 yards, and I don't know if you saw, but the amount of holding calls that got called, unbelievable. So he probably could have gone for $125, $150, if not for all the unrelated holding calls that didn't really have anything to do with the hole he was going into. But no, so I guess that's something the Colts know they can establish again, and maybe that happens. Is there any reason, what's your optimism level? Is there any reason for you to think the Titans do change it and take this one home?
I think they can. I don't know that I'm confident enough to say that they will. I think they can if the same team that shows up in Baltimore shows up again on Sunday, because that was an inspired football team that was fired up. They were playing angry. They were executing well. You didn't see the special teams gaffes, like the 17-yard punt. You didn't see the punt, the coverage whiffed and blocked for a touchdown. You didn't see the missed field goals. AJ Brown wasn't dropping sure touchdowns, those sort of things. So I think if they can clean those up and really, I know it's asking a lot. It's going to sound silly coming out of my mouth, but if they can keep the Colts run game from the steady trajectory that it's on after the last 2 weeks, I think they have a shot to make a couple more plays than the Colts do. But I wouldn't say that I'm optimistic about a win on Sunday just yet.
And you mentioned something I forgot that I wanted to talk to you about. I don't think us on the Colts side of things really understood how bad things were going on the special team side at specifically punting for the Titans.
Yeah.
That reared its head on Thursday. How did that go against the Ravens? Was there any leveling out, or are you still scared about it?
No, it was a lot better. I mean, you really didn't see the big mistake. They didn't have to really punt too much anyway, and Trevor Daniel was serviceable. Gostkowski wasn't missing field goals or anything like that. I think you feel like they got a lot better. They even, I don't know if you saw, they even executed a fake punt and they went for it. They snuck Logan Woodside, the backup quarterback, into the game. For some reason, the Ravens didn't think anything was weird about like putting the backup quarterback in on punt coverage, and they snap the ball to him. And he completes the pass, and they convert the first down, keep the drive going that eventually leads to points. So there was really like a night and day difference between the Colts game and the Ravens game on special teams.
Well, that's good for you guys then, because the Colts special teams coverage is pretty good. So we'll see if they think they have the secret sauce to that or not. But Stones, that's all I got for you, buddy.
My man, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. Colts fans, absolutely, you should be following Sobros Network by now. Also, you'll want to check out the unofficial Titans pod, especially leading up this week. Thanks again to Stoney for joining me.